Life can be unpredictable, full of change. Some good, some not so good, and some complicated. But one thing is constant. One thing never changes.
Hey family, I'm Caleb. And when I was in 8th grade going into 9th, I found out I had a love for singing. I was on the bus coming home from summer camp and I was singing a little ditty and I heard myself and I thought, I'm kind of good at this. So we're going through the rest of the summer. I start singing in the house more, right? My dad, who's a pastor at the church I go to, looks at me and he says, Caleb, I think you should try out for the youth group band. And I'm like, bet, like I'm about to be like Bruno Mars up in here. Like we got this. So the day comes, we're driving to the audition for youth group band and everything in me just says, nope, nah, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. So I'm like, Dad, I don't know. I think I'll just try next year or something. He's like, no, you got this, buddy. Let's go. And now I'm like starting to sweat in the car, right? I'm starting to sweat. I'm like, Dad, I forgot to do some homework. I got to go back to the house. He's like, Caleb, it's summertime. We're going. So we get to this audition, right? And I'm not even up first. Everybody else is already in the band. I am the only one auditioning. I'm sitting in the crowd waiting, and I just start crying. Like, not just like cute little like movie star tears. I was like, I was done. Yo, I was done. I was not doing this, right? Eventually, my dad and the youth pastor at the time, they're like, Caleb, you got to go up there and sing. I sang, and it went fine. Like, nothing really happened, but I made the youth group band, right? And then now, I sing for a living. It's crazy, right? It just doesn't make any sense that I would not want to do this, and now it's all I want to do. Like, how do we get here? Now, I bring all this up because in this series, we've been talking about change and all kinds of change. And one of the things we often experience with change is fear, like me auditioning for youth group band. And fear can stop us from making the changes we want. In fact, sometimes we don't even have to experience anything in real life to get our fear going, right? We can simply imagine a change going wrong and it's enough to shut us down, like a fear of failure. The idea of not making the team, getting rejected for the date, or not getting into that college can stop us from even trying. And I mean, it's scary. Other times, before we make a change, we want to know what the outcome will be. If somehow you knew you'd make the team before you tried out, then trying out, that'd be a piece of cake. But we can't see the future. We don't know the after. And that is also scary. It's called the fear of the unknown. There's uncertainty about what's going to happen in the future, which makes the present tough to handle. It makes us feel vulnerable or insecure, just facing the possibility of disappointment or being rejected. Now, other times, our fear of change is connected to whether or not other people are watching us. There are other people on the court when you try out for the basketball team. There were other people at my very emotional audition for youth group band. If you tell your small group that you want to stop drinking or you ask them to hold you accountable, all of a sudden, they're paying attention to your drinking. If you tell your parents you want to help out more around the apartment, they're going to watch to see if you follow through. Because let's be honest, if I wanted to make a change and the only person who knew whether I succeeded or failed was me, that's one thing. But as soon as other people are involved, it feels different. It's really less a fear of the unknown and more a fear of rejection. And rejection hurts, which can lead to us feeling judged or made fun of or left out. Now, this list could probably continue on, but you get the idea. Making a change isn't easy. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of rejection, I get it. all of that fear can make us want to avoid any sort of change at all costs, pushing us to want to quit, hide, or play it safe. But what if, even if everything never stopped changing around us, there was a way to not get knocked off course by fear? Now, as we talked about in part 2 of this series, the Hebrew people are an important part of the Christian faith. They were the group of people God chose to remain connected with in a special way. In fact, eventually, Jesus would be born out of this group of people. Most of what we call the Old Testament tells the history of the Hebrew people. And you don't have to get very far into their story to realize they didn't have it easy. As a people, they spent a lot of that time being defeated and captured by other larger, more powerful groups of people. And at one point, the Hebrew people went to Egypt to escape a terrible famine. They ended up staying there and growing so large in number that they started to be seen as a threat to the Egyptians. And this scared the Egyptians, so in order to control the Israelites, they enslaved the Hebrew people. The Hebrew peoples cried out to God to rescue them. And God listened and sent a man named Moses to lead them out of slavery. And through Moses, God set them free from slavery and committed to lead them to an incredible land of their own, a land they called the Promised Land. Israel's story doesn't get easier. They still wandered the wilderness for a long time. Think decades, before finally landing on the outskirts of the Promised Land. Upon arriving, they wanted to check it out before moving in. And after what they'd been through in Egypt, can you blame them? So they sent 13 spies to the land that they were hoping to make their own, to see what this Promised Land was like. Here's their report. They gave Moses this account. "We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit." Yo, that sounds amazing, right? They discovered the land that was absolutely beautiful. It was everything they dreamed it would be. But look what follows in the next verse. "But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large." So it was all good until they noticed that there were people living there who appeared to be powerful and had built cities that seemed indestructible. In fact, the King James version of a verse that follows says, "And there we saw giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." Could you imagine what it would take for you to see something so big and think to yourself, yo, I'm a grasshopper compared to that? Now, the spies went on to tell the Israelites there was no way they could live there because they were too afraid. It didn't matter how much they wanted the land. Their fear was way too big. And so were the people living there. So you couldn't blame them. Now, we don't know the actual size and weight of the people living in the land the Hebrew people were scoping out, but we don't have to relate to that feeling they had. When you and I decide to make changes in our life for the better, we face giants too, often in the form of fear. The fear of failure, rejection, and the unknown are kinds of giants. It's not easy to make a change and get out of a toxic relationship, or try to confront an addiction, or break another bad habit, or make a positive move we know we should. And so often we respond like the spies. We say, I can't do this. It's too difficult and scary. The giant of fear is too big. And so even if we genuinely want what's on the other side of change, we stay exactly where we are. We have no idea what we could miss if we allow our fears to be greater than our attempt to change for the better. If we let our fears control us, they have the ability to cause us to miss out on some really good things in life. The goal behind fear in these moments is for us to miss out on God's best for us. And that's the last thing God wants for us. Fortunately, not all of the spies came back with the same report. Two of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, came back with a completely different view than the other spies. Here's what they said. And they said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Now, maybe you noticed that at the end of that verse, it says they will devour the people already living there. And that sounds weird and violent. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good, it should. That's a weird thing to say. The point in saying that, though, is the Hebrew culture was separated by tribes, and sometimes things got violent because having land and taking land was a way of showing and maintaining power. It made sense to them to have to take this land and the people living in it, which doesn't mean that's what they should have done, or even that that's what God actually said. This was what they understood God to mean, and they wrote it down that way. The point in bringing all of this up is that when you are reading a document several thousands of years old, written in a different culture with different practices, there are bound to be confusing things that come up. It's okay to acknowledge them and talk to people about them. And best of all, God isn't afraid of them. And if the Hebrews got it wrong about what God said, we can know the truest representation of what God is like is Jesus, who is referred to as the Word of God. So while we may not know exactly what God said in this instance, we can know what God's Son was like. There was no confusion over Jesus demonstrating God's love. Now, back to the Promised Land. Everyone said they couldn't take the Promised Land except for these two spies. Why was their response so different? Because their fear didn't get the last word. They knew their fear was not the end of the story. They saw God as part of the story, and he had gotten them this far. Even if they were afraid, God would meet them on the other side of their fear. They knew that now was the time to flex their ability to trust. Does that mean they weren't scared? No way. They probably were. But here's the thing about trusting God. It's not about not being scared. It's about following him even though you're scared. Remember it this way. You can have courage even if. Those giants may have been real, and their fear was definitely real. But they knew they could have courage because of who God is. So they trusted him and took a leap of faith. If they had let their fear run the show, they would have given fear the final word of the story. They knew God would meet them on the other side of their fear, no matter how real it felt. And you and I can do the same thing when it comes to the areas of life where we want to make changes. You can have courage even if you're afraid. Now, it may be scary before we make the change, but it will be so worth it after. Now, this all sounds great, right? But what are some ways that you can practically put this into action? Here are a few steps to help you get started on having courage, even if you are afraid. 1, identify one change you'd like to make. As you listen today, was there something that came to mind? Is there something you want to audition or try out for? Is there a relationship that's not good for you that you need to step away from for a little while? Is there a relationship that needs to be improved and you could take some steps to do that? Is there a habit in your life that needs to be replaced with something healthier? Is there a grade that needs to be raised? Is there a part of yourself you're holding from others because of fear? You may have multiple answers, but for the sake of today, let's just focus on one. 2nd, identify one fear that surfaced as you thought of it. This is the thing that makes you want to pause and think, I'm not sure I can do that. Maybe it's a fear of rejection or failure or of the unknown. Maybe it's a fear of actually changing. Maybe it's a fear of the work you'd have to put in to make that change. Whatever it is, this is your giant. Pay attention to the giant and then invite God in. This is your chance to introduce your fear to God. This is your chance to have your Joshua and Caleb moment. This is your chance to remember that God is bigger than your fear. You could do something as simple as praying to God and sharing the change you want to make and the fear that is keeping you stuck. Let sharing your fear be the first step in choosing a different response to that fear. Fear is a legitimate and normal thing, but it doesn't have to control us and cause us to miss out. Even when you and I are scared of taking that step, we can invite God into that fear. Because everything may change, but some things never change. One of those things is that God is bigger than our fear, and God is with us. Imagine if you and I could live with that type of trust. What if we knew that no matter what fear we face, God is bigger? And if that trust in God helped us to make a positive change in our lives, how much more confidence would it give us to make the next change? When we live with the confidence of who God is, even if we're afraid, we can have courage. And not only that, we have each other. We have our small groups, which gives us an opportunity to have other people who walk alongside of us, encourage us in our faith, and help us make good changes in our lives. Let's remind each other this week that you can have courage even if.